think the contrast between us three pastors are going to be seen here. Action, rest. Very different personalities. In fact, I'm also thinking there's a progression of hair loss too. I looked like that 20 years ago. I'm here now, and Sabbath. So you can all go to sleep now. We're going to take a Sabbath, all right? So Sabbath, quite simply, is this. According to Exodus chapter 20, Sabbath is the seventh day of the week. And you know, right, the creation story, this is as old as time, literally, that God created the world the universe in 6 days, and on the seventh day he rested, the Saturday. And the Sabbath is in remembrance of that God set in this rhythm, this pattern, and if it's good for God, it's good for us, right? Work and then rest, and that pattern there. This idea is as old as time, Sabbath. God instituted it, and he built it into us that we are to have this rhythm of action and also rest. Now, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, Sabbath, I felt like it was a punishment. I really did. For us, a Sabbath, it was very, very different than the other days of the week. We had to do certain things, and we couldn't do, in my mind, a list of things. And Sabbath became legalistic for me. It wasn't joyful. And in fact, if you take a look at the progression of the Old Testament, by the time they got to Jesus' time, it became the same thing. Sabbath was supposed to be a time of joy. It was rest. But as we see in Jesus' time, it became a legalistic thing. Observing from the Old Testament there in the Hebrew Bible was that universally you work for 6 days and rested on the seventh day. But the Sabbath, the seventh day, was joy. It was an occasion of joy. It was something that we really look forward to. I can't wait until the day of Sabbath, when we can rest, when we can worship, when we can glorify God, when we can just take that time to do the things that we just didn't have time before and just delight in the Lord. Again, for me, I'm not sure what you all hear, but growing up, Sabbath was less joy and a lot more, I can't wait till Monday. You couldn't play ball. You had to go to church. Again, it was I have to do this type of thing. After church, I went home, and we couldn't go out to eat after church because that would make somebody else work. And we couldn't go to businesses because that would make them work too. Sunday afternoon, you could take a nap, and you could play games, but you had to be very careful what games you did play because you couldn't play cards, you couldn't play sports, you couldn't do TV even. That's what Sabbath was for me. And you couldn't Sunday shop because there wasn't anything open anyway, right? And so that was my idea as a kid, that I'm being forced to stop. But that is not what God had in mind, is it? It actually, all those different things sound pretty good to me right now, right? Go to church, go home, take a nap, don't do anything. Sounds pretty good. But that's what it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to take a break. I'm supposed to have this as a rhythm, that I enjoy this downtime. I enjoy this time just to do the things that I just didn't have space before. And we have a church rhythm that come this day, we do stop. We do worship. We do things a little bit different. Sabbath is not supposed to feel legalistic. It's supposed to be a welcome rhythm to our crazy, busy, and noisy world. And we do live in a noisy world, don't we? In fact, it used to be that we did have some downtime kind of built into our days, whether we liked it or not. We had times of boredom. We don't have boredom anymore. Today, we don't have those quiet times. We don't have those downtimes. We just have a crazy, busy, noisy world. The Sabbath today, here in the New Covenant time, the New Testament time, is a 24-hour period where we stop, we rest, delight, and worship. Can you remember that? Let's put some actions to that, actually. So I'm going to ask you to put your hands up. Can you do that? So stop, rest, delight. Look at that. Baptists putting their hands in the air. And worship. Okay? So we're going to stop, rest, delight, and worship. That's the rhythm that we need to put into our life. We need to live in the alignment with this ancient rhythm that God already built into us, that if we don't do it, it's going to cause the rhythm of our life to be interrupted and too busy, and we will burn out. So what do we need to do? You ready? Stop, rest, delight, and worship. Sounds attractive, right? In fact, God meant it to be that way. And we need to be doing that not only once a week, we need to find our Sabbath, but we can also have many Sabbaths throughout the day. Now, you take breaks throughout the day, don't you? We do that. It's just what we do, but we take different breaks than we did maybe back in the past. In the past, we had downtime and we had boredom. We'd have time to kind of have some space in our world because we had nothing to do. We were forced to have nothing to do. Let's go back 30 years. Believe it or not, 30 years ago was 1994. And back 30 years ago, you had downtime like you don't have today. Our downtime today tends to drain us. We do things that drain us and maybe don't fill us. For instance, what did you do 30 years ago when the power went out? Nothing, right? Nothing. There's nothing to do when the power went out 30 years ago. You went to bed when it was dark because there was no power. But today, if you're fully charged up, maybe you got 75% battery in your phone, you can stay up all night with data and you don't have to do nothing anymore. Used to be back in the day, if you wanted a little quiet time, you'd go to the bathroom and you'd read Reader's Digest, right? You just have some downtime there, or you read the back of a shampoo bottle. Well, today, we don't do that. You've got your phone and you can scroll and do messages and all that. In fact, I had some downtime this week. I'm selling my truck because it's a gas hog and I'm getting a diesel. I've got a diesel now, but I had to spend 3.5 hours at Service New Brunswick. 30 years ago, when you had nothing to do waiting for 3.5 hours at Service to run it, you know what you did? You read the signs on the wall, right? You tried to line up the French and the English and try to figure that kind of stuff out there. You had nothing to do. Well, guess what I did for 3.5 hours? I wrote a partial sermon, replied to 10 different messages, sent 3 emails, paid bills, sent 5 funny memes to my friends, consoled 4 Maple Leaf fans, and made fun of 2 Bruins fans. I didn't take a little Sabbath there. I was busy. Then you read Deuteronomy chapter 6 here. Deuteronomy 6 says, tell them to your children over and over again. Talk about them all the time, whether you're home or walking along the road, going to bed at night, or getting up in the morning. That's a great verse, but you know what? That sounds busy. It sounds like you're going to be doing this all the time. Seems like a lot of work. Teach them whenever you've got downtime. But think about this. I can get busy every single moment of the day doing absolutely nothing with my phone. I can get busy doing different things that are draining me, and I'm not really stepping into a time where, you know what? I can take a little Sabbath here. I can take a little bit of time to what? Stop, rest, delight, and worship in this moment instead of something that just drains me. Listen to this. A Jesus-centric life is less draining and more life-giving. So why not spend some time with him? A Jesus-centric life is more selfless and less selfish. A Jesus-centric life is more life-sustaining and less draining. A Jesus-centric life is more hopeful and less hopeless. And if we can step into those times, a day of Sabbath or a mini Sabbath, we can have a less worldly consumed and selfish life and a more Christ-centric life and a rhythm of that can be life-sustaining. Now, if it sounds like more work, listen to this scripture. Matthew 11:28-30. If you are tired from carrying heavy burdens, come to me and I will give you rest. Take the yoke I give you, put it on your shoulders and learn from me. I'm gentle and humble and you will find rest. This yoke is easy to bear, and this burden is light. My friends, if we step into moments of Sabbath, rather than moments where we just are consumed by the noise and the busyness of life, our life will change. I was listening to CBC Radio a few weeks ago where they tried to do a survey of people 30 and under and how much social media was affecting mental health. And so they had absolutely no problem finding people who consumed too much, and had a really hard time finding people who consumed too little. But what they did find was it was life draining. It was a drain and a hurt on our not only our spirituality, but also our mental health and emotional health. It was draining. And that's what we do in our downtime. So we're actually doing things that we like, and it's a habit that we have, but it's draining us. But what if we could step into what? A Sabbath where we what? Stop, and we rest, and we delight, and worship. Thank you for the 4 people that just did that. What do you want? A life of hope? A life of joy? A life of rest? A life that is centered on selfless love, life-giving sacrifice, life of purpose? Well, we can get energy and fullness of life in the Sabbath for doing what God wants us to do. So stop. Rest. Make a list in that rest of things that you can do on a Sabbath or a mini Sabbath. Delight. Take time to say, God, you're good. God, I'm going to spend time with other believers. I'm going to go into church. I'm going to find a study. I'm going to find a way to just delight in you, God, and worship. Pastor Gordon.